welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we will be talking about my tips for the Oriel system. So mainly talking about my tips for multiple mini interviews, the situational judgment test, and the numeracy test. So these are the things that I used during the Oriel system, and it was tips that I also got from people before me that had used the Oriel system as well. So if you don't already know, my name is Hannah and this is my channel, Naturally Hannah. I had to pause then because I was like, my name is Naturally Hannah, but it's not. It's just Hannah. But if you don't already know, I'm a pre-registration pharmacist in the UK. I'm currently in working in a hospital and a GP. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about Oriel. So there's three main stages of Oriel, main important bits: the multiple mini interview, the situational judgment test, and the numeracy test. I'll talk about the numeracy test first because it doesn't have that much into it. The pharmaceutical calculations are probably things you've already done before in university, but the main problem with it is that it is very limited time, like really limited. I didn't finish all the questions. I think there were 10 questions and I didn't finish all of them because you just do not have enough time. I can't remember exactly how much time you have, but trust me, it's not enough. So I didn't finish the question. So the way the numeracy test works, like I said in my previous video, is that it doesn't affect your ranking, but you have to pass it. If you fail your numeracy test, you are removed from the Oriel system. So this is a very important part of the Oriel system. It's pass or fail. That's it. So how I would recommend you passing your numeracy test is, of course, going over the pharmaceutical calculations and practicing the ones that they've taught you in uni. You can also look online for the kind of topics that are on the pharmaceutical calculations. So it's going to be stuff like dosing, concentrations, CV equals CV, that kind of thing. So it's, from what I remember, it wasn't that difficult, but it was just the timing was so tight. So another tip and recommendation I would have for you for the numeracy test is to do 10 questions, like try and find multiple random questions and try and do them in the time that you actually have. Or say you have 10 questions and however much the time is that you have to do the numeracy test, divide it by 10, and then that's how long you have for each question. So try doing the pharmaceutical calculations, like practice different ones, doing them in that little time slot that you have and try to complete those. I think that's the best way, the best recommendation I would give you to do with the numeracy test, as well as practicing your pharmaceutical calculations. So test number 2, which is your situational judgment test. So this test is not something you can really revise for. That's what they said, because it's a situational test. It's based on your decisions, and obviously you can't really revise your decisions. But where there's a will, there's a way, and there's always possibility to revise. So my recommendation for situational judgment test is to practice some online. So for example, doctors, they do quite a few situational judgment tests in their training. So there's a lot of information out there for situational judgment tests for doctors. And even though it won't technically slightly apply to us, it's still good to just have that experience and just have that thought process that goes in doing situational judgment tests. And my second tip, very important tip, is that the way you answer or the decisions that you make in the test, you need to make them as if you were a pre-registration pharmacist. The temptation may be to make them like you're a pharmacist because you are training to be a pharmacist, but this is seeing whether you can be a good pre-registration pharmacist, not a pharmacist. So don't make decisions that a pharmacist would make and a pre-registration couldn't make. So for example, I'm trying to think of what, like knowing when you should refer on is very important. So if a situation happens and you don't know what to do, so say for example something happened with controlled drugs, like you found a controlled drug discrepancy, what would you do? So in that case, because you're not registered, it's more important for you to make sure you let a pharmacist know that this is a controlled drug, and then they can deal with it. So that's the kind of thought processes you should be having if when you're answering the situational judgment tense. Answer it as a pre-registration pharmacist, and secondly, you can practice online to just get a feel of what they're like. Finally, we have the multiple mini interview. Okay, this is so daunting because you have multiple stages and you go and you see this examiner and then you leave. I remember when I was doing it, I was so nervous. Like, honestly, I was shaking, like legitimately shaking. And we did it at an arena, and there's so many pharmacy students there as well. And basically, you are competing against them for your ranking, but yeah, I was shaking, but you just need to be calm. I know they say that you should be calm, and it's the dumbest thing ever, because how can you be calm? But try to, honestly, try to be calm about the whole situation, because I think the calmer that you are, the easier it is for you to think about a question and actually think about what they're asking you, and also how to answer the question. So that nicely brings us on to how to answer their questions. So my top tip for multiple mini interviews is to memorize the professional's attribute framework for pre-registration pharmacists, because essentially that's what they're testing you on. They're trying to see whether you have the attributes that meet this professional framework, that eventually meet the GPHC framework for pharmacy professionals, because eventually you're going to be a pharmacist. So memorize them. So I think there's 9 attributes. Let me have a look. They are 9 attributes. If you look in the framework, they have behavioral indicators next to it. So it's basically the type of behavior that you would have that would demonstrate that you have that attribute. In the multiple mini interview, they're going to ask you questions that kind of should lead you to demonstrating at least one of the attributes within this framework. And then you basically have to answer in a way that demonstrates that you link at least one of these attributes in this framework. They might ask you a question that has more than one attribute in it. They might ask you a question that just has one attribute in it. So the key is recognizing which attributes they're trying to attain from you. I hope that makes sense. So, for example, they might be asking, tell me a time of when you worked well as a team. So this one is obvious, because obviously it's going to be a professional attribute attribute 5, which is multi-professional working and leadership. Then you think about, okay, what behavioral indicators were associated with that attribute? So another tip I would have is to memorize some key words, some key sentences within the behavioral indicators that you can say that demonstrate that you meet that attribute. So for example, a key sentence could be, so one of the behavioral attributes is acts as a role model. So motivates and leads others and acts as a role model. You could say, there was one time in university when I was working in a team project when I did interprofessional learning with medical students and nursing students and physiotherapy students. And I took the initiative to act as a leader. In this role, I was able to act as a role model and motivate the other students to complete their work. I hope you understand what I'm trying to put across. Think of situations, think of scenarios that link to the behavioral attributes. Take time to think and write situations or scenarios that are true and have happened to you where you have demonstrated the attributes. I feel like that's the best way to prepare, because you don't know what questions they're going to ask you, but you definitely know that they're going to ask you questions that are trying to demonstrate the attributes framework. So if you have a scenario in your head for each of the attributes framework, and you have a way of implementing the behavioral indicators that they've wrote into your scenario when you're explaining it, you are on your way. I know that was a lot, but I hope it made sense, and I hope that I really hope that you get the place that you want. And if you haven't watched my previous videos, then watch them. And as always, if you have any questions or anything, you can email me naturallyhannah6@gmail.com. You can Instagram me at pharmahan, and you can comment down below. You can click that like button. You can also subscribe. You can click the bell button so you get notifications when I post a new video. But I hope this has been helpful. I really hope that it's helped somebody to understand a bit more. Thank you for watching my video, and I will see you in my next video.